The room went still when the lawyer said her name. Everyone turned to stare, waiting to see what the divorced failure would get this time. Her ex-husband's new wife leaned back in her chair, whispering something that made the others chuckle. The lawyer cleared his throat and unfolded a single yellow page. "To my former wife," he read, "I leave the gas station on Route 9. For a moment, no one spoke. Then laughter broke out. Her ex's brother clapped his hands. "A gas station? That old junkyard," someone said. She sat frozen, her cheeks burning. The place had been abandoned for years, boarded-up pumps, rusted signs, and broken glass. People said rats lived in the office now. She had hoped for something small, a car, maybe a savings bond. But this? It felt like a final insult from a man who had already taken everything. When she walked out, they were still laughing. She didn't look back. That night, she stared at the paperwork over a cup of cold coffee. The words blurred together, but one detail caught her eye. The property had no listed debt, no record of sale, and no history of tax payment for nearly 2 decades. It didn't make sense. The next morning, she drove out to the site. The highway was quiet, the fog thick over the empty fields. When she reached the station, she almost turned back. The roof sagged. The windows were black with dust. But something about the place felt strange, too still, too intentional, as if it was waiting for her. She stepped closer, her boots crunching over the gravel. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the air smelled like oil, metal, and something else, something old. On the counter, beneath years of dust, lay a single brass key. She turned the brass key over in her palm, the weight of it far heavier than it should have been. It was old, handcrafted, with an engraved number on the side. *17. She didn't know what it meant, but it didn't feel random. Her ex-husband had never been sentimental, never one for riddles. If he left her this key, there was a reason. She slipped it into her pocket and looked around the dusty room again. The gas station was exactly how she remembered it from passing by years ago. The glass of the windows was cracked. The pumps outside were sun-bleached and stiff with rust. Faded signs hung crooked on the walls. Cold drinks, tires fixed here, open 24 hours. It looked like a place time had forgotten. She brushed her hand along the counter, leaving streaks through the dust. Behind it, she found an old register, the kind that rang with a bell when you opened it. She pressed the button, and it popped open with a metallic click. Empty, except for a single folded note tucked in the corner. She unfolded it carefully, the paper brittle and yellow. In messy handwriting, someone had written, "If you're reading this, you're not too late." Her stomach twisted. She read it again, half expecting the words to change. Who could have written this? And what did it mean? She moved to the back room, where the smell of gasoline was stronger. A few oil cans sat on metal shelves, long since corroded. A calendar on the wall was still turned to May 2003. Everything in that room felt frozen. But when she looked closer, she noticed something out of place, a section of the concrete floor that didn't match. It was smoother, newer, as if someone had patched it recently. The sound of a car passing outside made her jump. The engine roared past and faded into silence again. Her hands trembled slightly as she knelt and touched the floor. There was a faint seam running along the edge of the slab, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. She grabbed a wrench from the workbench and tapped the ground. Hollow. Her pulse quickened. She scraped away the dirt until the faint outline of a hatch appeared. The key, could it be for this? She hesitated, then fit it into the small iron lock half buried in the concrete. It turned smoothly, too smoothly for something untouched in years. The sound of the latch releasing echoed through the empty station. With both hands, she lifted the hatch. A rush of cold air escaped from below. Beneath her was a narrow staircase leading into darkness. The steps were metal, damp, and old, but solid. She grabbed a flashlight from a nearby shelf, surprised that it still worked, and started down, one cautious step at a time. The air grew cooler the deeper she went, carrying a faint hum, like machinery far away. When she reached the bottom, the beam of her light hit something she couldn't believe, a row of metal cabinets, labeled and locked. On the far wall hung a rusted sign that read Harper Oil Company, Private Storage. Her breath caught. She knew that name. Harper Oil had shut down in the 1980s after a massive lawsuit. Rumors said the company had gone bankrupt, but no one ever found out where their missing assets went. Could her ex-husband's family have been part of that? She opened one of the cabinets. Inside were stacks of papers sealed in plastic, preserved perfectly. Old contracts, land deeds, drilling maps, all stamped with the Harper Oil logo. She pulled one out, brushing off the dust, and froze when she saw it. The property listed wasn't just this gas station. It included miles of land stretching beyond the town limits. And at the bottom of the page, the owner's name was familiar. Her father-in-law. It didn't make sense. He had died years ago, leaving nothing but debt behind. So why were these documents here, hidden under the floor of an abandoned gas station? She flipped through more papers, her hands trembling as she realized what she was holding. Proof of ownership of massive oil reserves that had never been claimed. Land that was now worth millions. Maybe hundreds of millions. She stepped back, the flashlight flickering against the damp walls. Her heart raced. Was this why her ex-husband had left her the property? Did he know what was buried here? Or had she stumbled onto something that no one else was ever meant to find? A sudden creak echoed from above, footsteps on the floorboards. She turned off the flashlight, her breath catching. Someone was up there. The air was so still she could hear her own heartbeat. Another slow creak. Then silence. She waited, every muscle tense, until the sound faded. When she finally climbed back up the stairs, the door to the gas station stood open. The wind had picked up, carrying dust and rain through the doorway. She stepped outside, scanning the empty road. No cars. No lights. Just the endless stretch of highway disappearing into the grey horizon. She locked the door behind her and stood there for a long moment, the key still in her hand, rain beginning to fall again. She looked back at the cracked sign, the peeling paint, the broken glass, and for the first time, she saw it differently. This wasn't junk. This was a secret. The rain came down harder that night, the kind that blurred the world into streaks of grey and silver. She sat in her car across the road from the gas station, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Every time lightning flashed, she saw the old building illuminated for a split second, the roof sagging, the rusted pumps glistening, the front door swaying slightly in the wind. She couldn't stop replaying the image of those documents in her mind. Harper Oil. Land ownership. Her ex-husband's family. It all felt too big, too impossible to be real. When morning came, she went back. The rain had eased, but the air was heavy and damp, the scent of wet earth and gasoline mixing into something sharp and nostalgic. She pushed open the door, her boots squelching against the muddy floor. The hatch was still closed, the padlock untouched. She needed to know more. Who had put those papers there, and why had no one come looking for them all these years? She spent the day going through every inch of the gas station. The office held filing cabinets filled with receipts, logs, and maintenance records, all yellowed with time. Most were useless, but one folder stood out, labeled * Inventory 1982. Asterisk inside were old photographs, workers in oil-stained uniforms, trucks lined up outside the same station, and in one picture, a man she recognized. Her ex-husband's father, younger, smiling proudly beside a Harper Oil tanker. Beneath the photo, a handwritten note said, * Keep the records here. Safer than the city. * Safer than the city. The words sent a chill through her. What were they hiding from? She flipped through more papers until she found a small business card tucked between the pages, a name and address printed in faded ink. * Walter Green, attorney at law. * By noon, she was sitting in Walter Green's cramped office on the edge of town. The man was in his late 70s, sharp-eyed despite his years. When she introduced herself and mentioned the gas station, something in his expression changed. Not surprise, exactly, but recognition. "I didn't think anyone would ever come asking about that place again," he said, leaning back in his chair. She explained everything: the key, the letters, the hidden hatch, the documents. He listened quietly, tapping his pen against his desk. When she finished, he let out a slow sigh. "You have no idea what you've just uncovered," he said. "That gas station isn't just a property. It's the lockbox for something much bigger." She frowned. Bigger how? He hesitated before opening a drawer and pulling out a thick, dust-covered file. Inside were copies of legal documents, contracts, and newspaper clippings. Harper Oil was one of the largest privately owned drilling companies in the state, he said. But when the government began investigating illegal land deals, everything fell apart. The company was accused of drilling on unregistered land they didn't technically own. "But your ex-husband's father," He found something they didn't want to make public. "What was it?" she asked, her voice low. Walter looked at her for a long moment. Proof that the company had discovered a natural reserve worth over $200 million, but instead of reporting it, they hid it. They buried everything, the evidence, the maps, the ownership deeds, under that gas station. She stared at him, her mind spinning. And no one found it. "They tried," he said. "But after the company went bankrupt, everyone involved either died or disappeared. Your father-in-law built that gas station on top of the vault to protect what was left. He couldn't claim it legally, not without exposing the fraud. So, he waited. But before he could act on it, he fell ill. The papers stayed there. Everyone thought it was worthless land." She leaned back, her heart pounding. It made sense now. Why her ex-husband's father had never sold the property, why her ex had ignored it for years. They didn't know what they were sitting on. But someone did. "Does anyone else know about this?" she asked. Walter's eyes flicked to the window. "If they do, they've been waiting for someone like you to open the hatch again." A chill ran down her spine. That night, as she drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The same black truck had followed her for nearly 3 miles before turning off. When she parked outside her small apartment, she sat in silence for a while, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. The key in her pocket felt heavier than ever. She looked out the window toward the distant highway lights, the direction of the gas station. The thought hit her all at once. She wasn't supposed to find any of this. Her ex-husband had left it to her because everyone believed it was worthless. But now that the truth was out, someone else would want it. And they wouldn't ask nicely. When the clock hit midnight, she packed a small bag, grabbed a flashlight, and drove back to the station. The moon hung low behind the clouds, and the road was empty. As she pulled into the lot, her headlights caught something that made her chest tighten: fresh tire tracks in the mud. She killed the engine and sat there, heart racing, the silence pressing against her. Then she saw it. The door to the gas station was already open. She sat frozen in the car, her breath fogging up the windshield. The open door swung gently in the wind, creaking like a warning. Her first thought was that someone had broken in, but who would bother? The place had been abandoned for years. Still, the sight of those fresh tire tracks sent a shiver crawling down her spine. Someone else knew. She turned off her headlights, slipped out quietly, and closed the car door without a sound. The gravel crunched beneath her boots as she moved closer to the gas station. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional whistle of wind through the rusted sign above the pumps. She gripped her flashlight tightly but didn't turn it on. The last thing she wanted was to announce her presence. As she reached the door, she noticed muddy footprints on the floor, fresh, large, and leading straight toward the counter. She could still smell the faint scent of cigarette smoke, lingering in the air like someone had been there moments ago. Her pulse quickened. She crouched behind one of the shelves, her heart pounding so loud she was sure whoever was inside could hear it. Then came a sound from below. A metallic clang. The hatch. Someone was down there. She held her breath, inching toward the back of the room. The floor creaked under her weight, and she winced. Another clang echoed up from the basement, followed by the sound of metal scraping. Whoever it was, they were trying to open something. Maybe the safe, maybe the cabinet she had found earlier. She reached into her pocket and wrapped her fingers around the brass key, gripping it so hard it dug into her skin. Her mind raced. If she confronted them, she'd be outnumbered, or worse. If she waited, they might take everything. She looked around for something to defend herself with and spotted a rusted crowbar leaning near the door. She grabbed it, then slowly crept toward the open hatch. The faint glow of a flashlight flickered below, casting shadows on the walls. She could hear a man's voice muttering, low and angry. "Where is it? It's supposed to be here." Another voice answered, sharper. "It's gone. Someone's already taken it." Her stomach twisted. They knew. They were looking for the same thing she had found: the Harper oil papers, the evidence, the fortune buried under decades of lies. She stepped closer to the hatch, crouching beside it, and peered down. 2 men stood in the narrow basement, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. One was tall, heavyset, with a gray jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. The other was younger, thinner, but with the same hard expression. Between them, the cabinet doors hung open. Papers were scattered across the floor. The taller man kicked a box, cursing. Check again. She couldn't have known what it was worth. Her heart pounded harder. They were talking about asterisk her dot asterisk a floorboard groaned beneath her weight, and both flashlights snapped upward. "Who's there?" one of them shouted. She didn't think. She bolted for the door, her boots slamming against the wood. Behind her came the sound of footsteps pounding up the metal stairs. She pushed through the entrance and ran into the rain, slipping slightly on the mud. The headlights of her car were still off, and the darkness cloaked her as she ducked behind one of the old gas pumps. "Find her," the taller man barked. She peeked out just in time to see one of them emerge from the station, scanning the lot with his light. The beam swept dangerously close to where she hid. Her breath caught in her throat. She clutched the crowbar tighter, praying the storm would cover the sound of her breathing. Then, from inside the building, the other man called out, "Forget it. The safe's still locked. We'll come back in the morning." There was a pause. Then the sound of retreating footsteps, a car engine starting, and the faint glow of red taillights fading into the distance. She stayed still for a long time, drenched and shaking, until the silence settled again. When she finally dared to move, her legs felt like they might give out. She forced herself to walk back toward the open door. The hatch gaped like a wound in the floor, but the papers, thankfully, were still there. Scattered, but untouched. She gathered them quickly, stuffing them into her bag. Her hands trembled as she noticed something else, something the men must have missed. Beneath one of the metal cabinets, barely visible under the dust, was a small tin box. She pulled it free, brushed the grime away, and saw a label etched into the lid. Asterisk property of J.H. Do not destroy. Asterisk the key in her pocket burned against her hand. She knelt, slipped it into the lock, and turned. The box clicked open. Inside were more papers, yes, but also a small velvet pouch. She opened it carefully. Inside were several uncut gemstones, raw and brilliant even in the dim light. Beneath them, folded tightly, was a letter. Her eyes skimmed the first few lines, and the words sent chills racing through her. Asterisk if you found this, then you are the rightful heir to what was hidden. They'll come for it. They always do. But remember, the gas station was never about oil. It was about what lies beneath it. Asterisk her heart stopped. What could that mean? Beneath it. She stood, her clothes soaked, her fingers trembling around the letter. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the ground beneath her feet. The rain came down harder now, hammering the roof, echoing against the metal signs. She looked at the hatch again, the darkness below pulling at her like a secret that refused to stay buried. Whatever was under that floor, it wasn't just history. It was something far bigger. The storm raged through the night, slamming against the rusted walls of the old gas station like it was trying to tear the past right out of it. Sarah sat on the floor near the open hatch, soaked to the bone, the letter trembling in her hands. Asterisk, the gas station was never about oil. It was about what lies beneath it. Asterisk the words echoed in her mind again and again, louder than the thunder. She stared down into the darkness below, the beam of her flashlight barely cutting through the shadows. Every instinct told her to leave, to lock the place up, walk away, and never come back. But the pull was stronger than fear now. Something in her gut told her that this wasn't the end of the mystery. The letter, the gemstones, the documents, even the men who'd come searching, they were all pieces of something much bigger. She tied her hair back, grabbed the lantern she'd brought, and started down the metal stairs once more. The steps groaned under her weight, slick from the rain that dripped through cracks above. When she reached the bottom, she turned slowly, the warm light spilling over the shelves and scattered papers. Her eyes followed the faint outline of the floor, the same patch of concrete where she'd first found the safe. But now, something about it looked wrong. The edges weren't perfectly sealed. There were tiny cracks she hadn't noticed before, faint lines running in a square pattern beneath the dirt. She knelt, brushing away the dust with her sleeve until a metal latch revealed itself near the far corner. Another hidden door. Her heart thudded once, heavy and sure. She pried the latch open and pulled. The metal cover resisted at first, then released with a sharp metallic snap. A wave of cold air rushed up from below, carrying the smell of earth and something older, like oil and stone. The light from her lantern revealed a narrow tunnel leading deeper underground, lined with wooden beams and rusted pipes. She hesitated, gripping the lantern tighter. "Okay, Sarah," she whispered to herself. "You came this far. No turning back now." The tunnel sloped downward, just tall enough for her to walk hunched over. Her footsteps echoed softly, the sound of dripping water filling the silence. The deeper she went, the more she noticed the markings on the beams, numbers, initials, and arrows drawn in chalk. Someone had built this on purpose. It wasn't a random storage pit. This was engineered. After what felt like several minutes, the tunnel widened into a chamber. She stepped inside and froze. The space was huge, far larger than anything she could have imagined sitting beneath a rundown gas station. The walls were lined with massive steel drums, pipes leading out of them into the earth. In the center stood an enormous cylindrical structure covered in dust, cables snaking along its base. A faint hum vibrated through the floor. She set the lantern down and brushed her hand along one of the drums. Her fingers came away greasy, the smell unmistakable, crude oil. But it wasn't from the past. This was fresh. Whatever was down here wasn't abandoned. It was active. She spotted a clipboard hanging from one of the pipes and flipped through the pages. The date stopped only 2 years ago. Every record was stamped with the same name. Harper Industries Restoration Project. She swallowed hard. Harper Oil wasn't dead. It had been reborn, quietly, secretly, beneath this station. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. Her ex-husband hadn't left her a useless property. He'd left her proof of an illegal operation worth more than $200 million, hidden right under everyone's noses. Suddenly, a sound echoed from behind her, a clatter, faint but sharp. She spun, the lantern shaking in her hand. Footsteps again. Someone else was down here. "Who's there?" Her voice cracked, swallowed by the vast chamber. A flashlight beam flashed across the wall, blinding her for a moment. Then a voice, calm, low, too familiar. "You shouldn't have come back here, Sarah." Her chest tightened. It was her ex-husband. He stepped into the light, older, thinner than she remembered, but the same cold confidence in his eyes. "You were supposed to sell it," he said quietly. "That's all you had to do." She backed up a step. "You knew about this? You hid this." "I protected it," he replied. "You think the world would just let this sit under a gas station? They would have destroyed everything. I was keeping it safe until the right time." "Safe?" She laughed bitterly. "You lied to everyone. You buried evidence that could change everything. You let me think I inherited junk." He didn't flinch. "Because you never would have believed me. And because the moment anyone found out, people would start coming after you. They already have." The sound of another engine roared above them. Headlights flashed briefly through a crack in the floor. Sarah's stomach dropped. The men from the night before. Her ex-husband grabbed her arm. "We have to go, now." She pulled free, clutching the lantern like a weapon. "Not until you tell me the truth." He stared at her, rainwater dripping from his hair, his expression haunted. "The truth is that this isn't just oil. It's the last unregistered reserve in the region. The government doesn't know it exists, but if they did, they'd seize it, erase everything, and everyone tied to it, including you." The rumble above grew louder, car doors slamming, footsteps. He looked at her, eyes desperate. "You have the documents. You have the proof. Whatever happens next, don't let them have it." Before she could respond, the sound of boots echoed down the tunnel. Flashlights flickered in the dark, voices shouting. She turned toward the noise, the lantern trembling in her hand. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Run." And before she could move, the first shadow appeared in the tunnel, the beam of a flashlight slicing through the darkness like a blade.